And we are back. I am Skip Murphy. Mike is here with me in studio. This is GrokTALK, a production of GrokTALK.com, New Hampshire's leading conservative libertarian blog site, as well as CNHT, the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. And we are thankful to them for lending us their area here for us to have all of our equipment and our guests and our stuff. And once again, we are here to talk about the news of the day and what else is going on. Oh, excuse me. We are waiting for our next guest to show up here. Not quite sure where they're at just yet. We're expecting Max Abramson to show up here in studio for his criminal justice update segment. We're still going to wait on him, but in the meantime, Mike, there's lots going on.
Oh, yes, there is. Okay, so let's begin. So this week, the FCC voted, because they were told, to regulate the internet as a common public utility, just like your phone company, electric company, and cable company, which doesn't seem to me to be the best way to foster innovation.
And they've already been slapped down once for attempting to do this. What Mike's talking about is trying to put the dynamic internet as it has grown up at this point back into the 1930s, when the first federal regulations were put into place to highly regulate the phone system, as it was morphing into much more of a monopoly than what it was at the time, with basically, you can't do anything unless we tell you that you can, and here's, oh, by the way, how much you're going to charge for that particular service.
And how much you're allowed to make as profit, which is how electricity companies and phone companies are regulated.
Yeah, so all of a sudden,
within an inch of their life.
Right, so what's happened is the FCC, by a vote of 3-2, Democrats versus Republicans along party lines, have just decided that we are basically going to make the internet a government monopoly, or at least a highly regulated government environment, and this has all been done under net neutrality. And you know,
right,
I got to read that little thing that
blurb. So there's two things wrong. I mean, some people say that the phone companies are in some ways ripping them off. I had an excellent counterpoint sent to me by one of my colleagues about the things that internet providers are doing wrong. But that is nothing that can't be fixed by competition, in my opinion, and that'll be a lively debate later. The point is that these net neutrality provisions, as they are so called, have been sponsored from the beginning by a guy called Robert McChesney, who is a communist.
Yes, in fact, I have something here. He's actually operating under the Free Press Foundation.
Which is not about freeing the press either.
No, and here's a quote from something that he has said, which gives you his outlook as to why he's been trying to get government to basically take over the internet. In the end, there is no real answer but to remove, brick by brick, the capitalist system itself, rebuilding the entire society on socialist principles. So while they rail about the capitalists and the big mega corporations controlling the internet, we're just swapping all of those big corporations to an even larger government. And once government gets in line and starts to take over, then everything becomes political. As one person said a long time ago, you're only trading one master for another, and the government listens to the loudest special interest. But we'll continue this a little later on in the show. Because
we got plenty of time later, and this is fascinating. And part of it, I will read out the submission from Scott McGrath, which I'll have to post later. So anyway, Max is here, and let's talk about criminal justice updates.
Yes, New Hampshire State Representative Max, what happened to your eye?
I was sick. It's a pretty graphic story. I've been getting asked this for the last 3 weeks.
Wow. Guys, I don't know whether you can see this on camera.
Both eyes. I was throwing up so badly. After you run out of stuff to throw up, your body just keeps trying to heave, and you dry heave until the blood pressure gets so bad that eventually you burst a vessel.
Ooh. Wow.
Yeah, so.
Wow. Folks, you can't see this, but his right eye, the right side of his right eye is all red. And the left, the left one pretty too underneath. Well, I'm glad to see that you were if you want to keep your eyes closed, if that's better, that's fine by us. He's blinking like who can I talk about? But anyways,
Sammy Davis Jr.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how healthy that energy drink is here, but
but anyways, Max, I'm
but
glad
that's as may be. Max went to the time and trouble of coming here in spite of having suffered lately, and we're very glad he is.
Yeah.
If I might say something about net neutrality, though, I've certainly
Sure.
been a long-time supporter of net neutrality, but I think that's something that can be worked out in the marketplace. I think that the best protection that consumers have isn't government regulation. It's lots of choices and being fully informed. And as long as government just protects us from, as long as the courts are there to protect us from force and fraud, I think that's much better than
exactly
regulating everything to
prosecute fraud, prosecute coercion. Do not prosecute competition, and that's the difference. And the communists want to prosecute competition, of course, and anybody who somehow wins through competition. And I think, all right. In terms of competition, what you need is to get the towns out of the business of regulating their local utilities. I'll stop.
Yeah. So what's up on your docket there, Mr. Max?
So we actually had, over the last month, we've had a tremendous amount of good stuff coming up. The most notable and the best attended was, of course, constitutional carry. And that went in front of...
That was SB 116 in the Senate?
And it came up again, I forget the bill number, HB maybe 582.
That sounds right.
Was... yes, it is. That came up on Thursday in front of the House Criminal Justice Committee. I testified on it very briefly. And of course the points that I made were the same points that are generally made each year, which is the shall issue states like Vermont and Montana and formerly New Hampshire have the lowest crime rates, that the may issue states, as New Hampshire is being slowly turned into by the courts, are higher crime or moderate crime states, and the gun control cities in the states, of course, have the worst crime. Washington, D.C., Chicago, New York, and states like Maryland, Illinois. They're stricter gun control states, and consequently only criminals can get firearms. And their murder rates, rape rates, property crime rates are much higher. At the same date, they had another hearing on HB 472. I'm sorry, HB... I've lost it.
That's okay.
HB 650, which is requiring background checks for commercial firearm sales, which is Representative Cushing's bill. Representative Cushing is one of the most liked, respected individuals in the State House, but he's also a supporter of a number of gun control bills, and every year he comes back with a gun control bill. And this year it was the background check bill, which was, one, unnecessary, and two, the bigger concern, of course, was that the bill was poorly written. Now, you can say it's the sponsor, or you can blame legislative services, but there were so many problems with the bill that I think that when they exec it, I believe it's due for being exec next Tuesday, that it's unlikely that it will pass.
Well, it's always good when poor bills die. I mean, the first thing is, why do we need any more damn laws? And the second thing is, why do they have to be so long, voluminous, and full of things that can be used against us later?
Well, in the same vein, I testified against a state sales tax in front of Ways and Means, and the argument that I used, and I got a lot of head nods, and I think we've killed this one again this year, a state sales tax I think would be a lot worse even than a state income tax. Now, those of us who are against a state income tax or a state sales tax, there's the debate going on, which would be worse. I think the sales tax would be economically worse, and I think the administrative problems would be worse. The argument, though, that really struck home, I think, with the committee was, you start with a 2.25% sales tax, and eventually it's going to grow out of control and develop its own life.
Yeah.
Well, you can say that, and I come from Massachusetts, where I've watched the income rate go up and up and up, and it happens pretty much the same way. It always seems to go up and never comes down. Same thing with the sales tax. But at least with the income tax, well, you can say 6 of one, half dozen of another. With automatic deductions out of paychecks, most people never see
don't know how badly they're being robbed, which is part of the argument for a sales tax.
Because it's highly visible.
And if you did away with some of the cost shifting that's involved in robbing school districts to pay poor school districts, for example, and funded by a sales tax, maybe you'd be better off. But anyway, there's a philosophical argument on sales taxes versus property and income taxes, which is a whole long debate. More to the point, you had good reasons why we shouldn't have a sales tax.
Well, actually, the someone from the Retail Association came in and followed up in even more detail. My argument: there are 4 problems with any tax.
Actually, I'm going to have you hold on to that thought for just a minute, because we've got to go to a quick break. So if you could, folks, we'll be right back. We are GrokTALK.com, pushing out this podcast called GrokTALK, and folks, we will return in just a moment.
It's time for GrokTALK.
And we are back. I am Skip Murphy with GrokTALK, a production of GrokTALK.com, New Hampshire's leading conservative blogative, I'll go with it, website. Unfortunately, I've had to switch away from the Mountain Dew, and this morning it's showing. But we'll go on with the show. By the way, I just got an email. Steve from CPAC down in Maryland, just outside of D.C. Mike, he likes your scarf.
Okay, well, it's an educational choice scarf from a couple of years ago, actually, National School Choice Week.
Yes, and I am a big believer in the money should follow the child and not just go to the school and the zip code. But that's for another segment. Max, just before the break, you were starting to talk about the 4 reasons why. And if you could do that, I'd appreciate it.
There are 4 problems with any tax: sales tax, income tax, gas tax, you name it. The first problem is the lost economic activity. And the lost economic activity is we have structural deficits in New Hampshire. Of course, they exist anywhere, no matter what type of tax you have. Anytime you tax something, people start to notice that that particular item or activity is taxed in your state. So they tend to start migrating to another state. They gradually change their behavior and they look for less expensive ways to do things. So they avoid the tax. Second is the administrative costs. The administrative costs with a state sales tax would actually be terrible. I come from Washington, and we have a 9% state sales tax.
That's Washington State.
Washington.
Instead of Washington, D.C.
We just call it Washington.
Okay.
Back there. Pacific Northwest.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another problem. Another problem is the lobbyists. In Olympia, Washington, we have a steady stream of lobbyists coming in all the time, as do every state with a state sales tax, or a state income tax, or business taxes, or any other type of tax.
Anywhere there's money, you've got lobbyists trying to get it for their people.
And they're trying to get special tax deductions and exemptions. The same thing in Washington, D.C. There's a going rate. I think it's $15 in special tax breaks and exemptions per dollar contributed. So if you want $150 million in tax breaks, you just have to give $10 million out to politicians in Congress in campaign contributions, and you get it.
Oh, yes, Boeing.
Boeing's one of the worst. GE is one of the worst.
Oh, yeah, I believe that, absolutely.
So we have all these problems, any type of tax you create. So when the governor was talking about all of the nice programs, the commuter rail project and subsidies and $40 million in pay raises for state employees, I'm not just thinking of the $40 million out of people's pocket for this, or $30 million for that, or $300 million for the commuter rail project. It's all of these other problems that result. It's a lost economic activity and lost jobs.
Oh, but you're such a skinflint there, Max. Don't you know that taxes are the price for civilization for an ordered society?
No. When Teddy Roosevelt was president, federal, state, and local taxes consumed 7% of the national income, and most of that was local. We had national parks, fire departments, police departments, civil courts, criminal courts. We had Yellowstone National Park. We had the Great White Fleet that he built. We had an army, a navy. We had everything you could want from government and more. And we had no federal income tax. We had very, very low state-level taxes. People griped about their local property tax levy and whatnot, but overall your tax burden was was negligible compared to what it is today, and there was no national debt either.
Right, and now it's closer to 50% for a lot of people.
Oh, and in California and New York and Illinois, where the income taxes are the highest, it can go over 60%. And I've had
remember that golfer who threatened to move out of California because he was paying 60% of his income, and the trouble he got from the left.
That's correct. Well,
The problem is federal, state, and local. When you count excise taxes, hidden taxes, import taxes, utility taxes, the whole myriad, transportation, travel, gas taxes, it takes anywhere between 1/3 and 2/3 of your earnings.
Now,
And it has nothing to do with your income. It has nothing to do with, whether you can afford it or not, or your condition or your occupation. It's almost completely random and arbitrary. It has nothing to do with who can afford to pay it. It's just right on that very first dollar, they start taking about 1/3 of your earnings.
And it sounds like we're complaining about taxes, and why not? Everybody else does. But for us, there is a point. We understand that, yes, one has to pay taxes for a limited government, which is why this country was founded, a limited government. And I think to provide basic services, none of us would disagree that, yes, every good citizen should pay their fair share. The problem comes into what is that fair share, and when is enough too much? I watch O'Reilly ask that question to people on the left, and they never give an answer. I had a couple of folks have had some long comments on the Grok about this. Recently, it was a tag team effort against Bob, who I kept on asking, when is enough enough? And he'd go off on tangent. He sounded like Timothy Horrigan almost. Oh, we'll talk about Timothy in just a few minutes.
I absolutely believe.
But never would I ever get an answer. When is enough enough? They always go over here, over there, somewhere else, bring in this stat, that stat, and they won't answer the question. Never.
I have always said, I've always maintained, and I've always believed that for Congress, there should be a Constitution candidate. Not Constitution party, but a constitutional candidate. So if you get fed up with the two parties, there's always someone there on the ballot, and if they get elected, all they do is go in as a delegate or member of Congress and always vote no on anything that is unconstitutional. It should be automatic, and if the voters vote for that Constitution candidate, he just keeps voting no on everything.
Oh, we've had a few.
Patriot Act, NDAA.
Well, and that's I think a reason to have a party that's exactly that as well. The question is, would it keep to its roots? Because the Republican Party says it's for small government and the founding principles of the republic, but it never lives up to it.
That's correct. One of the things that, Dr. No was one such person. Dr. Coburn, who was a senator, he got the nickname of Dr. No. Ron Paul was also a Dr. No, where he would vote against most kinds of things because he felt it, and both of them felt it was not the right thing for government to do, especially at the federal level. And that's where you're seeing the angst on the conservative side right now and the libertarian side, and Rand Paul is getting so much publicity and especially excitement from the young, where I don't want government listening to your private phone calls. I mean, it really gets to that point where it's freedom versus safety and security. That's that constant battle that we're in. And right now, freedom's not been doing all that well.
No, and Ben Franklin laid it out right at the beginning, and he's been proven to be absolutely perspicacious, as Bill Riley would say.
So there have been a couple of other criminal justice bills that have gone through.
Go for it.
Senate Judiciary, House Judiciary, and House Criminal Justice and Public Safety. One that keeps getting brought up is mortar shells. They want to prohibit the sale of mortar shells, of aerial fireworks in New Hampshire. And now the reason that I signed on against this bill is towns already have the ability to limit or prohibit the use of almost any type of firework within their town. But that's the use. They're talking about the sale. So what this bill would have done, HB 490, which I was asked by a constituent to go testify against, or to go take a stand against, was that it doesn't deal with the use. It only deals with the sale of fireworks in New Hampshire. So people can still go to Maine or some other state or buy them online. More and more fireworks are ordered online. So why would they buy something in New Hampshire if it's illegal to buy it here?
All it does is damage the local businesses, which right now are doing very nicely, selling to more restrictive locales like Massachusetts.
Correct.
So
Where
it
it's
just
legal
turns the situation on its head.
Massachusetts, it's legal to set off fireworks, but it's illegal to buy them there, which is wonderful for us, which I think they're starting to catch on now, that every time they make it illegal to sell something, that people just come up to the,
Yeah.
excuse me, they just come up to New Hampshire and they buy it here.
I keep wondering about the it's the nanny statism, because a lot of them will say, well, we want to keep you safe, or as Ralph Nader says, we have to save people from themselves. And we've heard that here in New Hampshire from various Democrat legislators, and they just don't want to take the responsibility of saying, let adults or the individuals take responsibility for themselves. And my feeling is, if you get hurt doing something like fireworks or skydiving or anything like that, if you get injured, there's your consequence. Here's your sign. And
you'd better have the insurance for it, because that's, again, that's personal responsibility.
Right. And and I think that if somebody else is injured while you are doing this, then obviously you are going to suffer a big consequence in court. And I don't see why the government has to step in and say, because the actions of a few, we're going to punish everybody. And I keep thinking that every single time that I open up one of my gas cans to fill up my snowblower, how hard those freaking nozzles are to pour the gas out of the gas things. And I'm going, just because a few yahoos got burnt throwing gas on fires, I have to put up with this crap and spill more gas on the ground than I ever would have before. I just hate it.
The dog in the lap bill. I had a constituent ask me about people driving with a dog in their lap.
Guess what? We got to go to another break. Let's come back with that, because I don't think we have a 10 o'clock guest at this point. So we've got a full half hour coming up, folks. I'm Skip. He's Mike. We've got Max in the house, and we're just going to have a good old time here talking about stuff of the day and the idiocy of those who want government to be your mom.
All right.
We'll be right
Let
back.
me switch to the test card.
GrokTV.